Hunter Nemechek is returning to the Camping World Truck Series, and this time it's with Kyle Busch Motorsports and Toyota. How's it going, y'all? My name is Eric, and welcome to Out of the Groove. Breaking news this afternoon as I was wrapping up editing today's earlier video. As a matter of fact, Hunter Nemechek dropped the bomb. For the last week or so, ever since Nemechek shockingly announced his split from Front Row Motorsports, everyone's been on the edge of their seat, wondering where's he gonna land? What's his plan? What's happening? Well, today Nemechek announced his 2021 plans. We're gonna talk all about those here in tonay's episode, I guess, because I think there's more to this decision than initially meets the eye. Now, if you missed my video from earlier today, we talked all about Live Fast Motorsports' recent introduction. We talked about the NASCAR charter system and maybe some of the discussions or manipulations that are happening, and we kind of talked about that earlier today. So if you missed that video, check it out. But here tonight, we are talking all about Hunter Nemechek and his 2021 plans. So let's get to it. This afternoon, Hunter Nemechek revealed that he will be driving for Kyle Busch Motorsports in the NASCAR Camping World Truck Series next season full time. He will be in the number 4 truck, effectively replacing Raphael Lessard. Again, this news comes just days after Hunter Nemechek announced he was walking away from Front Row Motorsports. The way it was reported at the time made it sound as though it was Hunter Nemechek who actually went to Front Row and said, hey, I'm not coming back next season. That's what led to all the speculation. Ooh, what other opportunities does Nemechek have if he's walking away from a full-time Cup gig? Because Hunter Nemechek was a rookie in the NASCAR Cup Series last season, and while the numbers by themselves don't look super impressive, 3 top 10s, no wins, finished 27th in points, when you keep in mind the equipment he's running and you compare his performance last season to all of Front Row's performance in 2019, Nemechek had a great season, especially for a rookie. So very surprising to hear that a Cup Series driver who had a pretty solid rookie season is opting to step into what's seen as a lesser series. That is still the dichotomy of NASCAR, as everyone views the Cup Series as the top, the big leagues, and then there's Xfinity, which is kind of the minor leagues, and then there's trucks, which is sort of like its own thing, but it's basically looked at as the third series. So many people are going to look at Hunter Nemechek going from a Cup ride to a truck ride as a demotion of sorts, and I don't think that's entirely fair. Personally, I see this move as a positive for Hunter Nemechek, and definitely a positive for Kyle Busch Motorsports and Toyota. I have not heard any rumors or conversations about where Raphael Lessard is going. He's the teenager from Canada who was a rookie in trucks this last season, had 7 top 10s, got that win at Talladega, but ultimately failed to make the playoffs. The last couple of years have not been great for KBM drivers, and all due respect to Raphael Lessard, he did not perform up to KBM standards last year, so I'm not super shocked to see him let go. But I am a little surprised here Hunter Nemechek is taking his place, but I think this is a win for KBM and Toyota because they're getting a driver who has a ton of truck experience and some truck success we'll talk about. He also has now a full year of Cup Series experience under his belt. He's still only 23 years old, so he's still very young, has a lot of potential upside down the road, so I think this is a big move for Toyota, a manufacturer that's sort of seen its development program cleaned out in recent years. They've lost some pretty top prospects, and some in the Cup Series side just haven't always panned out. So I think this is a pretty decent move for all parties involved. Firstly, let's talk about Hunter Nemechek's Truck Series resume, if you will. When I still think of Hunter Nemechek in trucks, I'll be honest, I still think of that Canadian Tire finish from a few years ago where he basically bodied Cole Custer out of the way to get the win, and then there was that fight altercation after. I mean, I can't help it. That's still what I think of when I think of Hunter Nemechek and trucks. But Hunter Nemechek, across 102 starts, has 6 Truck Series wins. He raced 2 full-time seasons, 2016 and 2017. He won 2 races each of those years. His entire Truck Series career has been spent driving for his father's team, Joe Nemechek, Nemco Motorsports. So this will be the first big Truck Series opportunity Nemechek has had away from Joe Nemechek's team with a completely new organization. And it is a competitive one at that. Hunter Nemechek actually spoke to the media earlier today. Here's a clip that Bob Pockris from Fox Sports posted to Twitter. And here Nemechek explains part of what he was thinking when he decided to take this deal. And he talks a little bit about what he feels he can bring to KBM and maybe what KBM can bring to him.
There were some things towards the end of the year. I didn't know where I stood on coming back to Front Row Motorsports, and didn't know if that was even going to be an option for me. When it comes down to it, winning never hurts. Winning can only help you and help your marketability. So I want to win races. I think that the experience side from myself, from running in the trucks in the Xfinity Series and the Cup Series, is somewhat what KBM and Toyota was looking for.
Interesting, at the very beginning of that clip, Nemechek mentions that his future with Front Row was not as certain as maybe we all thought it was. It sounds like they had not yet made a decision on their 2021 driver lineup, and Nemechek still might have found himself without a ride for next season. So with that in the back of our minds, I guess it's no surprise at all that Nemechek was looking for another opportunity, and this KBM one probably looked pretty good. Looking at this move from John Hunter Nemechek's perspective, I see it as a high risk but potentially a very high reward move, and I'll explain what I mean. First, it's high risk because while there sure was no guarantee that Nemechek was going to be able to stay with Front Row in the Cup Series, there's a good chance he would have stayed in Cup next year. He probably wouldn't have been for a super competitive team, but he would have made that Cup Series money. He would have gotten the Cup Series stage exposure. He would have made a healthy living if he'd been able to stay in the NASCAR Cup Series next season. So it is a risk stepping out of that opportunity and going to a series that, quite frankly, does not have the exposure the Cup Series has, does not have the money involved the Cup Series has. Some drivers who may end up leaving their not-so-great Cup Series rides to go run somewhere more competitive in Xfinity or trucks sometimes have a harder time making it back into the Cup Series. I think of like Brett Moffitt, or you could say Justin Allgaier, although I'd say Allgaier's landed in a very comfortable situation with Junior Motorsports the last several years. You can look at what's happening to Daniel Hemrick right now, who, interestingly enough, has also been signed by a Toyota and JGR team to run their Xfinity program next year. Not quite sure yet if Daniel Hemrick's going to be able to turn that into a Cup Series opportunity again, but there is some risk involved. It can be hard to work your way back into the Cup Series if you leave the Cup Series at a young age. So there is some risk in this move, but the reason I say it's high reward is John Hunter Nemechek is still only 23 years old. He's still fairly young for a Cup Series or for a NASCAR driver in general. And now he's joining Toyota, TRD's development system, if you will. And while if you just look at the last several years, that may not be a great thing. Toyota's had a hard time holding on to good young talent over the years. But we did a video on this about a week ago. Denny Hamlin, 2311 Racing, they're already teasing possible major expansion over the next couple of years. For a while now, the only competitive Toyota team in the Cup Series has been Joe Gibbs Racing. Even when Furniture Row or Levine has briefly popped up, they're aligned with Joe Gibbs Racing. It all stems from Joe Gibbs Racing. 2311 Racing will be a single car team next year, but by 2022 or 2023, we could easily see 2, 3, or maybe even 4 2311 cars. That's 2, 3, or 4 more Toyotas backed by TRD with top stuff in the NASCAR Cup Series. So in other words, there might be some great opportunities here just a couple of years down the line for a driver like John Hunter Nemechek to land in a competitive Cup Series opportunity, something way better than Front Row Motorsports was ever going to give him. There's a lot of ifs involved there. There's a lot of things that have to go right, and first and foremost, John Hunter Nemechek needs to perform next year with KBM. But if Nemechek runs well, as I think he will next season, if maybe he gets promoted to Xfinity and runs well there's a very real possibility we could be talking John Hunter Nemechek as a Toyota Cup Series driver just a couple of years down the line. So high risk because it can be hard for drivers to get back into Cup after leaving Cup, but high reward because in this case, Toyota may not be a bad development system to get into right now with potentially many more seats opening up on the Cup Series side of things. In my opinion, it all comes down to winning. If you can win in trucks or Xfinity, you're going to get exposure. I've heard plenty of drivers say that for them, it's all about just getting to the Cup Series because then it's easier to sell sponsorship because the audience is much bigger, the exposure is much bigger. Some drivers running well in trucks or Xfinity just isn't worth it. They'd rather run 30th in Cup because it's just a more stable job for some people. That may be true in some ways. I mean, quite frankly, the NASCAR Cup Series consistently brings in 2, 3, 4, 5 million viewers a weekend on average. Meanwhile, the Truck and Xfinity Series often struggle to break 1 million viewers. So you're not entirely wrong there. NASCAR is extremely top heavy. So many people watch the Cup Series and then not nearly as many watch Xfinity or trucks. It's all up here. So there is a point to this. I saw Kelly Crandall on Twitter actually made a good point, kind of made a good argument, or explained it very well. She said, I'm fascinated by classifying moves as a step back, the most recent being on Daniel Hemrick and John Hunter Nemechek. Why is running trucks or Xfinity viewed negatively? Not everyone can be a Cup driver or on a timeline they want. Good rides are good rides. Paychecks are paychecks. I think this is part of another big problem we have in this sport. Everyone has to go to Cup. Anyone who seems to have talent immediately goes into the getting a Cup ride conversation. Again, what is wrong with building a career in the other series? We need more of those drivers. And I actually agree with her. I mean, those drivers still do exist. I mentioned Justin Allgaier. You could look in trucks at like Johnny Sauter or Matt Crafton, for example. But I think she's correct. The average NASCAR fan, and I would even argue the average competitor, the average sponsor, the average media member, views the NASCAR pecking order as ARCA, trucks, Xfinity, Cup. And there's very little breaking from that latter. Cup is always going to be seen as a bigger deal than Xfinity. Xfinity is always going to be seen as a bigger deal than trucks, and so on and so on. And again, while it is true, it's harder to win a Cup race than it is to win a truck race or an ARCA race. That's clear. I do think it's important that we don't just look at the NASCAR Cup Series and say, if you're not in Cup, you don't really matter. Like, looking at every other series as a feeder series first, I think is the wrong way of looking at things. Sure, there are certain race teams in Xfinity and trucks that use those series kind of as feeder series for their Cup programs, but there are plenty of teams in Xfinity and trucks, plenty of drivers in those series that have their sole focus set on running well in that series, Xfinity or trucks. Those are very real series that stand alone well by themselves. They just don't have the massive audience that the NASCAR Cup Series has. So that's why most people ultimately end up looking at the Cup Series as the be-all, end-all. That is the end goal. If you're not in Cup, that means you must have fallen short on a goal somewhere along the way. I do think it's important that fans don't always view those series in that way. I mean, the Xfinity Series this year had some of the best racing, I think, across all three series pretty consistently. I had a lot of fun watching Xfinity this year, more fun watching Xfinity than Cup a good amount of the time. Anyway, that's all I really wanted to talk about with John Hunter Nemechek. Excited to see what he can do in trucks next season. Excited to see what his future with Toyota may look like. We'll all find out together, it sounds like. Thank you all for watching this video. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram. As always, a huge thank you to my amazing Patreon supporters for supporting the show even during the off season. Couldn't do it without your support. More to come this week. Monday's already worn me out entirely, so we'll see what happens. Have a great rest of your Monday night. I will see you all again very, very soon.